Some of the most dangerous people you'll ever meet won't raise their voice at you, won't insult you, and won't openly try to hurt you. In fact, if someone asked you about them, you'd probably say they're genuinely nice people. And that's exactly what makes them so hard to recognize, which is why you need to watch this entire video. These individuals don't show up as enemies. They arrive as friends, as people who listen, as helpers, as people who feel safe to be around. But then, almost invisibly, something shifts. Your life starts changing in subtle ways. You feel more hesitant after being around them, more tired after conversations, less confident about decisions you used to make easily. Your goals start feeling heavier, your clarity fades, your motivation dulls. Nothing dramatic ever happens. There's no big betrayal, no explosive conflict, just a quiet erosion happening beneath the surface. And because they're kind, you end up doubting yourself. You tell yourself you're being overly sensitive, ungrateful, or overthinking things. You excuse what doesn't feel right because on the surface, nothing looks wrong at all. But here's what you need to understand. Most people figure this out too late. Not all harm comes from cruelty or aggression. Some of the worst harm comes from subtle influence, emotional pressure, and quiet discouragement delivered gently, patiently, and over time. These people don't ruin your life by attacking it directly. They ruin it by slowly steering it off course. And if you're watching this on Stoic Code, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now because what we're about to explore could completely change how you see your relationships. Also, drop a like if you're ready to protect your peace and energy from people who subtly hold you back. Let's talk about the first type. The constant well-meaning doubter doesn't look like a problem at first. They never insult you. They never raise their voice. They never say you can't do something. Instead, they sound reasonable, caring, and responsible. They'll say things like I just want you to be realistic, or I'm only asking because I care, or I don't want you getting disappointed. And that's exactly why they're dangerous. Their doubt doesn't feel like doubt at all. It feels like wisdom. They position themselves as the voice of reason in your life. They frame hesitation as maturity, fear as intelligence, and caution as love. They don't shut down your dreams outright. They soften them, slow them, and wrap uncertainty around them until you start questioning yourself. Over time, something subtle happens. You stop getting excited out loud. You stop sharing ideas early. You rehearse your plans defensively, already preparing explanations and justifications. Not because the plan is actually weak, but because you've learned that enthusiasm will be met with doubt. This person doesn't destroy your confidence in one moment. They train you to distrust it. They rarely say anything obviously negative. Instead, they ask questions, and questions feel neutral and thoughtful. But their questions always point in the same direction. What if it doesn't work? Have you thought about how risky that is? Do you really think this is the right time? Isn't that kind of unrealistic? What's your backup plan if it fails? On their own, these questions aren't bad. But when every idea is met with skepticism, when every risk is highlighted, when every ambition is met with concern, you start associating your own vision with danger. Slowly, without realizing it, you internalize their voice. Before you take action, you hear it in your head. What if this fails? What if I'm being naive? What if I'm embarrassing myself? The doubter no longer needs to speak. They live inside your head now. I remember a time when I was genuinely excited about a direction I wanted to take my life. It wasn't reckless or impulsive, just something that felt aligned with who I was. I had thought about it for months. I had done the research. I felt that rare combination of fear and clarity, the kind that usually means growth is coming. So I shared it with someone close to me. They listened quietly, nodded, smiled, and then came the pause. Not an aggressive pause, just a thoughtful one. They said, it sounds interesting, I'm just wondering if you're maybe aiming too high. That sentence stuck with me. Then they added, people usually fail at things like that. I'd hate to see you waste time. They weren't cruel. They weren't dismissive. They sounded responsible. And because I trusted them, I didn't argue. I started explaining myself instead. I talked about my plans, my backups, my reasoning. They nodded again and said, I'm just being realistic. Someone has to be. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Not externally, internally. I didn't abandon the idea that day, but something dimmed. The excitement softened. The urgency faded. The voice that said go became quieter. Over the next few weeks, I noticed something strange. Every time I thought about taking action, I felt heavier, more cautious, less certain. Not because new information appeared, but because someone I trusted had planted doubt and labeled it care. Eventually, I delayed, then delayed again. And one day, without a dramatic decision, I realized I had stopped moving toward it altogether. No one stopped me. I stopped myself. And that's how the well-meaning doubter works. The reason this kind of person is so influential is simple. They don't attack your confidence directly. They redirect it. They position themselves as more rational than you, more grounded, more experienced. So when they question you, it doesn't feel like opposition. It feels like guidance. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Their doubt is often rooted in their own fear, not your limitations. They project their caution onto your courage, their risk aversion onto your ambition, their past disappointments onto your future possibilities. And because they frame themselves as just caring, you hesitate to push back. You don't want to seem reckless or arrogant or ungrateful. So instead of defending your vision, you shrink it. Exposure to a well-meaning doubter creates a very specific psychological pattern. You become excellent at seeing problems and terrible at trusting momentum. You overthink timing, over-prepare, over-explain. You wait for certainty that never comes. And worst of all, you lose your relationship with intuition. That inner sense of this feels right becomes suspicious to you. You start outsourcing your decisions, looking for approval, waiting for permission. Not because you can't decide, but because you've been subtly taught that your judgment is incomplete without someone else's skepticism. A well-meaning doubter has a few unmistakable patterns. They rarely express excitement for your growth. They emphasize risk more than possibility. They frame ambition as immaturity. They call hesitation being smart. They rarely encourage bold action even when you're ready. And most importantly, you feel smaller after talking to them. Not devastated, not attacked, just quieter. Not everyone who loves you believes in your future. Some people love you as you are because your growth forces them to confront what they didn't pursue. So they keep you safe, comfortable, grounded, but also contained. And they do it kindly. You don't need blind encouragement, and you don't need reckless optimism. But you do need people who know the difference between concern and projection. People who challenge you without paralyzing you. Who ask questions without draining your confidence. Who trust your ability to learn even if you fail. Because the most dangerous doubt is the kind that disguises itself as love. And once you learn to recognize it, you stop asking, are they right? And start asking the question that actually matters. Do I feel more capable or more afraid after listening to them? Now let's look at the fear projector. The fear projector rarely sounds negative. They don't tell you not to try. They don't insult your ideas. They don't mock your ambition. They simply warn you. And warnings feel responsible, wise, protective. They say things like, I just want you to be careful, or I've seen how these things usually end, or I don't want you to get hurt, or life isn't as simple as you think. On the surface, they sound like someone who cares, but over time, you realize something unsettling. Every warning leads in the same direction. Don't move. A fear projector takes their unresolved fears and places them into your future. They speak with certainty about risks they never faced. They describe failure in vivid detail while having little experience with success. They don't say, I'm afraid. They say, this is just how the world works. Their fear is framed as realism. Their hesitation is presented as intelligence. Their inaction is disguised as maturity. And because fear is contagious, you absorb it, not consciously, but subtly. Fear projectors don't block your path. They cloud your vision until the path no longer looks worth walking. The most effective fear doesn't scream. It whispers. It comes dressed in stories. Someone I know tried that and failed. Most people don't make it. You should be grateful for what you already have. They speak in generalities, in worst-case scenarios, in cautionary tales. But notice what's missing. They rarely talk about learning, adaptation, growth through failure. They talk about risk as if it's final, as if one mistake defines an entire life. That's not wisdom. That's trauma wearing a thoughtful expression. Fear projectors often speak calmly, slowly, with confidence. They don't argue emotionally. They sound grounded, and that makes you question yourself. You think maybe they know something I don't. Maybe I'm being naive. Maybe confidence is ignorance. So you listen. You absorb their tone, their certainty, their caution. And slowly you begin to associate movement with danger. Living under a fear projector's influence creates a specific mindset. You start thinking in losses instead of possibilities. You imagine failure before effort. You hesitate even when nothing has changed. You wait for the perfect moment which never arrives. You become skilled at imagining what could go wrong, but unfamiliar with what could go right. This isn't intelligence. It's a nervous system conditioned to avoid risk, and it shrinks your life quietly. Here's the part most people miss. Fear projectors don't just fear failure. They fear contrast. If you move forward while they stay still, their excuses collapse. Your courage becomes a mirror. So unconsciously they try to keep you close, similar, safe. They don't sabotage you directly. They anchor you emotionally. Not out of malice, but out of unresolved regret. A fear projector has a few consistent patterns. They emphasize what could go wrong more than what could be learned. They talk about other people's failures but rarely their own attempts. They frame ambition as dangerous. They discourage change while calling it concern. They've stayed in the same place for a long time. And most importantly, after talking to them, you feel hesitant, not informed. Healthy caution asks, how can you do this safely? Fear projection asks, why would you even try? One prepares you, the other paralyzes you. One respects your agency. The other subtly removes it. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to argue. You simply stop letting their fear narrate your future. You listen, but you don't internalize. You consider, but you decide. Remember this. Their fear is evidence of their limits, not yours. The world has never been moved forward by people who waited until fear disappeared. Growth always involves uncertainty, risk, discomfort. The fear projector will call that foolish, but history calls it necessary. So the next time someone warns you with absolute certainty about a future they've never lived, pause and ask yourself quietly. Is this wisdom or someone else's fear asking me to carry it? Because the life you avoid out of fear is often the life you regret not living. Let's move to the third type. The quiet competitor never announces themselves. They don't challenge you openly. They don't argue with you. They don't try to outshine you in obvious ways. In fact, if someone asked you about them, you'd probably say they're supportive, they're chill, they're not competitive at all. And that's exactly what makes them dangerous. Because the quiet competitor isn't trying to beat you loudly. They're trying to stay close enough to measure themselves against you without you noticing the subtle signs. At first, you might not notice anything. They laugh at your jokes. They congratulate you quickly. They show interest in your ideas, but something feels off. It's not hostile. It's not jealous. It's subtle tension you can't name. Your wins are acknowledged but never celebrated. Your excitement is met with calm neutrality. Your confidence creates an invisible shift in the relationship. Nothing you could call cruel. Nothing concrete, just a quiet cooling. And because there's no obvious conflict, you dismiss the feeling. The quiet competitor doesn't want to surpass you. They want to stay comparable. Your progress threatens their self-image, not because they hate you, but because your movement highlights their stillness. So instead of attacking you, they do something far more subtle. They withdraw energy. They become less curious, less responsive, less enthusiastic. Humans are social creatures. When energy isn't returned, we instinctively pull back. That's how quiet competitors slow you down by quietly removing emotional oxygen. I remember noticing this pattern with someone I genuinely liked. We were close, shared ideas, talked often. At first, they were engaged, asking questions, reacting, participating. Then something changed. I started moving forward in a way that mattered to me. Nothing flashy, nothing arrogant, just steady progress. Every time I shared an update, their response got shorter. Not rude, not distant, just flatter. Nice, that's cool, good for you. No follow-up questions, no curiosity. At first, I assumed they were busy or tired or distracted. So I shared less. But here's the strange part. When they talked about their plans, I listened fully, encouraged them, engaged. But when the roles were reversed, the energy wasn't there. Eventually, I stopped bringing things up altogether. Not consciously, instinctively. It felt awkward to be excited around them. Like I was doing something wrong by progressing. And that's the hallmark of a quiet competitor. Nothing is said but something is communicated. My growth had changed the emotional balance. Being around a quiet competitor for too long creates a subtle but real effect. You begin associating success with tension, progress with guilt, confidence with discomfort. You learn without being told that growing costs you connection. Humans often choose belonging over expansion. So you hesitate, you pause. You slow yourself down. Not because you're afraid of failure, but because you're afraid of standing alone. Quiet competitors are rarely malicious. They are usually tied to comparison. Fearful of falling behind. Unclear about their own measure of success. Comfortable when everyone moves at the same pace. Your growth threatens their equilibrium. So instead of confronting their insecurity, they regulate you. Not with words, not with sabotage, but with subtle withdrawal. Support wanes as you gain momentum. Milestones are minimized. Curiosity diminishes when you succeed. Distance appears during your peaks. They remain present during your struggles. The clearest sign. You feel more comfortable sharing setbacks than successes with them. If you remain in a quiet competitor's orbit, you pay silently. You start living smaller than your potential. You dim parts of yourself that don't fit the dynamic. You trade authenticity for harmony. And because nothing dramatic happens, you often don't notice until years later. You wonder why certain seasons felt muted. Why you hesitated when you didn't need to. Why you waited for permission that never came. Healthy relationships don't compete silently. They ask questions. They lean in. They let your growth inspire their own. They don't make you feel guilty for evolving. They don't disappear when you rise. They don't require you to stay the same to remain connected. Not everyone who walks beside you is walking with you. Some people stay close not to support your journey but to measure their distance from it. And when that distance becomes uncomfortable, the relationship quietly changes. So pay attention not to what people say when you're struggling, but how they behave when you're winning. Because the quiet competitor never announces themselves. They just slowly teach you that being less is easier than being free. Now let's discuss the overly agreeable friend. The overly agreeable friend seems harmless, almost ideal. They never argue. They rarely disagree. They nod along with everything you say. At first, it feels like harmony, like effortless friendship, like someone who just gets you. But over time, something subtle begins to emerge. You notice your own voice fading. Your opinions shrink. Your enthusiasm becomes cautious, and yet nothing about them is aggressive. Nothing is confrontational. That's what makes them so quietly destructive. The overly agreeable friend thrives on comfort. Yours and theirs. They fear conflict. They fear tension. They fear being disliked. So instead of being honest, they agree with everything, with everyone. On the surface, it seems kind, but over time, this constant agreement has a subtle effect. They validate your ideas, but rarely challenge them. They never question your assumptions, even when they're flawed. They avoid giving feedback that could make you uncomfortable. And human brains need mirrors. They need challenge. They need friction to grow. The overly agreeable friend doesn't provide that. Instead, they reinforce the status quo. They keep your thinking safe, and slowly you stop pushing yourself. I remember a phase in my own life where I had an overly agreeable friend. We shared ideas constantly. We laughed. We seemed aligned on everything. When I brought up new plans, they would always respond enthusiastically. That sounds amazing. You'll crush it. Absolutely. Go for it. At first, I loved it. The encouragement felt effortless. No arguments, no doubts, just positive energy. But I began to notice something strange. When I ran into real challenges, when decisions got complicated, or when I needed honest feedback, I found myself alone. They never said, "Have you considered this?" Or maybe there's a different way to look at it. Or even "I don't know if that will work." They had agreed to my ideas so many times that I stopped seeing the gaps myself. I assumed that since they supported me, everything was fine. And slowly I started making mistakes. Big ones. Mistakes I could have avoided if someone had actually questioned me. I realized too late that their constant agreement had created a kind of echo chamber around me. I had been surrounded by someone who liked my ideas but didn't help me refine them. The overly agreeable friend teaches you to value approval over accuracy. When you receive constant validation, your brain begins to crave it. You start to measure success not by results but by their continued agreement. You stop trusting your own critical thinking. You stop seeking other perspectives. Over time, this creates a quiet dependence. You rely on their yes to feel confident. You fear their disagreement more than you fear mistakes. And since humans naturally seek social harmony, you start censoring yourself. You downplay ideas that might provoke a different response. You avoid sharing doubts. You adjust your vision to match what you think they want to hear. Without realizing it, you're shrinking silently, subtly. Most overly agreeable friends aren't malicious. They simply fear disruption. They fear tension. They fear rejection. In their minds, agreeing is safer than challenging. And in the short term, it feels safe for everyone. But the cost is hidden. Your growth, your clarity, your independent judgment. They agree with everything, even things that conflict with their own beliefs. They rarely push back on decisions that affect you both. Conversations feel easy, but not necessarily deep. You notice that your ideas feel untested when you leave their presence. They disappear or seem uncomfortable when you face real challenges. The key sign. You feel supported but never challenged. There's warmth but no sharpening. The first step is awareness. You need to see that constant agreement isn't always kindness. It can be a subtle form of control. By keeping you comfortable, they keep you contained. Then you can seek relationships where honesty is valued over comfort. Encourage dialogue that includes disagreement. Learn to trust your instincts instead of external validation. Recognize that friction is often a sign of growth, not conflict. Not all friends who nod along are allies. Some keep you in a loop of comfort, shielding you from criticism, but also from growth. True friendship doesn't mean agreement. It means honesty, challenge, and balance. The overly agreeable friend may seem harmless. They may seem supportive. They may even seem perfect. But over time, their constant yes can quietly stunt your potential until you realize the very comfort you cherish was also what held you back. Let's move to the fifth type. The insecure complimenter seems harmless, maybe even charming at first. They praise you. They celebrate small victories. They make you feel seen. On the surface, it feels like kindness, like a genuine boost. But there's something off because the compliment almost always comes with a shadow, a subtle twist, a quiet redirection. And over time, you start to feel less celebrated and more scrutinized. The insecure complimenter isn't malicious. They usually don't wish you harm. They simply measure themselves against you constantly, even when they act supportive. Here's how it works. They praise, but almost immediately compare. Wow, you're so organized. I wish I could do that, but I always mess things up. They compliment, but add subtle doubt. You're really good at that. It's surprising you pulled it off so easily. They redirect attention to themselves after celebrating you. That's impressive. I actually tried something similar once, but it didn't work out. Even without intending harm, these small remarks plant seeds of doubt in your mind. Instead of purely feeling proud of yourself, you start wondering, am I really that capable? Was this just luck? Did I do as well as I think I did? I remember working on a personal project that I was genuinely proud of. It wasn't huge, just a small goal I had been pursuing for months, but it represented progress, clarity, and personal effort. I shared it with someone I considered a close friend. Their response was enthusiastic at first. Wow, that's amazing. But then almost immediately came the qualifiers. I wish I could do something like that, but you know me, I'm just too scatterbrained. Honestly, I've tried that before and it didn't work out. Not sure I could pull it off the way you did. At first, I laughed it off. It felt like harmless self-deprecation, like they were just being modest. But over time, I realized something subtle had happened. Every time I tried to share a win, I started feeling a flicker of hesitation. A small voice inside me asking, do I really deserve to be proud? Will my success make them feel bad or like they're failing? I noticed myself downplaying achievements, waiting for permission to celebrate, softening the excitement I used to feel naturally. All because the person who was supposed to celebrate me was silently measuring themselves against my accomplishments. The insecure complimenter often leaves you feeling ambiguous about your own success. You feel appreciated yet slightly diminished, seen yet subtly compared, praised yet uncertain. This isn't about overt criticism. It's about internalizing someone else's insecurity. They train you quietly to moderate your own confidence, to double-check your wins before enjoying them, to avoid shining too brightly, lest it highlight their own perceived shortcomings. And the effect is cumulative. Most insecure complimenters aren't cruel. They are usually constantly comparing themselves to others, hyper-aware of their own shortcomings, uncomfortable when others succeed without them, afraid of being overshadowed. They offer praise as a way to stay connected. But the underlying fear always leaks through. Sometimes in words, sometimes in tone, sometimes in body language. Your success becomes a mirror for their self-doubt. And because human connection is built on reciprocity, you unconsciously adjust your expression of pride to avoid discomforting them. Compliments are immediately followed by self-deprecation or comparison. They rarely celebrate your wins without redirecting the focus. Your successes make them subtly uncomfortable, even if they don't show it openly. Over time, you find yourself downplaying achievements around them. And the most telling sign. You leave interactions feeling appreciated, but also slightly small. Unlike the overt critic or the doubter, the insecure complimenter doesn't attack you directly. Instead, they encourage you just enough to keep you connected, embed subtle doubt through comparison, condition you to downplay confidence, make achievement feel like a shared burden instead of personal joy. If this continues, it erodes your relationship with your own validation. You begin to seek reassurance, not from yourself, but from someone else's approval. The key is awareness. Recognize when praise comes with projection. Celebrate your wins fully, even if others can't match your excitement. Separate their insecurity from your accomplishments. Surround yourself with people who can celebrate success without guilt or comparison. Not all praise is pure. Some compliments carry hidden weight. The insecure compliment seems kind, but subtly, quietly, they remind you of limits that exist more in their mind than yours. True support uplifts without comparison. True celebration doesn't measure you against anyone else. So the next time someone praises you and immediately qualifies it, pause and ask yourself quietly. Am I being celebrated or measured? Because the difference matters. Now, let's talk about the sixth type, and this one is particularly insidious. The soft-spoken gaslighter is one of the most dangerous types of people you'll encounter. They don't shout. They don't attack you directly. They rarely make grand accusations or dramatize situations. At first, they seem reasonable, calm, gentle, and even caring. They listen, they nod. They speak with a quiet authority that makes you trust them. But slowly, very slowly, their words and actions begin to make you question yourself. Gaslighting by definition is about making someone doubt their perception of reality. The soft-spoken gaslighter does this subtly. They don't lie loudly. They reframe events calmly. That's not exactly what happened. You must have misremembered. They don't accuse. They suggest you're overreacting. You're taking this too seriously. I don't think it was a big deal. They don't dominate conversations. They with doubt over time. Are you sure you understood it correctly? Because their tone is gentle, their words feel plausible. You don't feel attacked. You feel unsure. And that's the trap. A loud, angry critic is easy to recognize. You see the attack, feel the impact, and defend yourself or walk away. The soft-spoken gaslighter is the opposite. They create confusion without confrontation. They make you question your memory, your judgment, your instincts. You leave conversations wondering, did I imagine that? Am I too sensitive? Am I overreacting? And because their words are calm and rational, you often internalize the doubt. You trust them more than yourself. I remember a colleague who perfectly embodied this type of behavior. We were working on a collaborative project and there were clear tasks assigned to both of us. I noticed something wasn't being done correctly and politely brought it up. Instead of denying it outright, they leaned back, smiled faintly, and said, "I think you might be remembering it wrong." I was pretty clear about my approach. "Are you sure you're thinking of the right timeline?" I double-checked my notes. Everything matched exactly. Yet somehow by the end of the conversation, I found myself apologizing to them. Later, in another instance, they softly criticized a decision I had made independently. I don't think that was the way I would have done it, but maybe I'm just picky. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't confrontational, but the effect was the same. Self-doubt, hesitation, second-guessing. Over months, I started avoiding sharing ideas fully. I began questioning my own judgment in situations where I had been confident before. Even small decisions became mentally exhausting. By the time I recognized what was happening, it had seeped into my daily thinking. I was questioning myself more than necessary, and they never had to raise their voice to achieve it. The soft-spoken gaslighter works slowly, quietly, and consistently. You begin to distrust your memory and perceptions. You start second-guessing decisions that were once obvious. You feel the constant need to seek validation before taking action. Because the manipulation is subtle, you don't recognize it as manipulation at first. You just feel unsettled, unsure, exhausted. This form of gaslighting is so effective because it feels like concern, reason, or guidance when in reality it is strategic control. The soft-spoken gaslighter often thrives on maintaining subtle control without confrontation, keeping others dependent on their perspective, avoiding conflict while still influencing outcomes, testing boundaries silently, then shaping perception. Their calm demeanor disarms you. You want to believe in their rationality, their kindness, and that makes it nearly impossible to challenge them without feeling guilty or defensive. You often question your memory or judgment after interacting with them. They frame your emotions as overreactions calmly and consistently. They subtly reframe events without confrontation. Their calmness creates doubt, not clarity. You feel confused or mentally drained after conversations. The most important sign. You leave feeling unsettled even when nothing bad was said. You don't have to confront them aggressively. You simply need to trust your own perception and instincts. Keep clear records of events, decisions, and communications. Validate your own feelings and reactions first. Limit exposure if self-doubt starts to take over. The key is recognizing that their calm demeanor is part of the manipulation, not a reflection of your oversensitivity. Not all manipulation is loud. Some of it is whispered, subtle, and deliberate. The soft-spoken gaslighter doesn't need to raise their voice to control you. They quietly erode confidence, foster doubt, and slowly take authority over your perception of reality. True allies do not make you question yourself unnecessarily. They challenge you, yes, but they also respect your judgment and your memory. When you feel mentally exhausted, unsure, or constantly apologizing despite being right, pay attention. Let's move to the seventh type. The silent resentment holder is a master of subtle sabotage. Unlike overtly toxic people, they don't yell, they don't attack, they don't argue. They smile, they nod, they seem pleasant, even kind. And for a long time, you think everything is fine. But beneath the surface, something is quietly brewing. Inattention, a slight coldness, a feeling that you can't quite place. Because the silent resentment holder doesn't express their dissatisfaction openly, they carry it quietly, let it fester, and let it influence their behavior toward you. They don't confront you about what's wrong. They don't articulate grievances. Instead, they let resentment seep into small, subtle behaviors. Delayed responses, curt or clipped comments, avoidance of eye contact, slight withdrawal in moments of connection. And it's not dramatic enough for you to call out. It's quiet, polite, almost invisible. But over time it accumulates. The energy in the relationship changes without explanation. You start to feel uneasy, guilty, or anxious without understanding why. Silent resentment holders teach you something dangerous without ever saying a word. They make you responsible for their emotions because they refuse to communicate. You internalize their tension. You replay conversations. You second-guess your behavior. You wonder what you might have done wrong. And because humans naturally want harmony, you start adjusting silently, unconsciously. Over time, you shrink. You apologize preemptively. You moderate your joy, your success, your opinions just to keep the relationship smooth. This is slow, quiet control, and it's incredibly effective. I experienced this with a friend who always seemed calm and kind. We had been close for years, shared ideas, supported each other. But gradually, I noticed subtle shifts. They would agree with me on plans, but later make remarks that hinted at dissatisfaction. "Oh, you're doing it that way. Okay, I guess that could work if you think so." Sometimes they would avoid conversations entirely when topics involved my growth or success. At first I assumed I was imagining things. I told myself I was overthinking. But the more time passed, the more I noticed the pattern. Every time I accomplished something meaningful or took initiative, their warmth diminished. Every time I expressed excitement, their responses were lukewarm. Even subtle smiles seemed forced. Eventually, I realized that nothing I said or did could make them feel fully comfortable. And instead of addressing it, I had unconsciously begun censoring myself, sharing less about my achievements, playing down my enthusiasm, avoiding topics I knew might trigger a quiet, unspoken resentment. By staying close, I had adapted to their silent tension, letting it shape my own behavior without confrontation. Silent resentment holders don't need to argue to control you. Their power lies in ambiguity. They never tell you what's wrong. Consistency. They carry the same subtle tension over time. Emotional leverage. You naturally try to restore harmony. Humans are wired to reduce tension in relationships. When someone's resentment is silent, you try harder to please them without realizing it. And over time, this diminishes your autonomy, confidence, and self-expression. Conversations leave you feeling uneasy without a clear reason. They express grievances, but shows subtle withdrawal. You find yourself over-apologizing or moderating behavior unnecessarily. Their warmth diminishes during your successes. You feel drained after interactions even though everything seems fine. The most important clue. You sense a weight that doesn't belong to you but feels like it does. You don't need to force confrontation. You don't need drama. What you need is clarity. Acknowledge the tension is theirs, not yours. Set boundaries for your energy. Limit sharing personal wins if it triggers subtle resentment. Seek relationships where emotions are expressed openly and constructively. The key is to stop internalizing what they refuse to communicate. You are not responsible for managing someone else's unspoken dissatisfaction. Not all toxicity is loud. Some of the most harmful people in your life carry resentment silently. They never accuse you, never argue, never attack. And that makes it almost impossible to recognize until it has already shaped your behavior. The silent resentment holder quietly teaches you to shrink, self-censor, and prioritize their comfort over your growth. True allies don't leave you guessing. They speak their minds. They allow space for disagreement. They express dissatisfaction directly so it can be resolved. When someone leaves you feeling tense, uncertain, or guilty without explanation, pay attention. Now let's discuss the eighth type. The emotionally polite avoider is deceptively easy to be around. They're friendly, considerate, and attentive, at least on the surface. They smile, they listen, they appear calm and supportive. At first, it feels like a safe relationship. You can share ideas, frustrations, or feelings, and they nod politely. They don't judge. They don't argue. They don't make waves. But the problem isn't what they say. It's what they don't. Because the emotionally polite avoider doesn't address discomfort. They don't process conflict. They don't express boundaries clearly. Instead, they quietly withdraw or sidestep emotions, leaving you to navigate the tension alone. Their politeness is a mask for emotional absence. When a difficult topic arises, they respond with neutrality. Okay, if that's what you think. I see. Sure. They rarely challenge your perspective, even when it's flawed. They rarely express their own feelings, fears, or opinions. And while this seems harmonious, it carries a hidden cost. You begin second-guessing yourself. You fill in the blanks of their reactions with your own assumptions. You feel alone in navigating the emotional weight of the relationship. In short, their politeness creates emotional ambiguity. It's impossible to know what they truly think or whether they're even invested. The emotionally polite avoider often teaches you subtle dependence without realizing it. You start moderating your emotions to avoid making things uncomfortable. You hesitate to voice doubts or concerns. You become hyper-aware of their mood, trying to maintain harmony. Humans naturally seek connection and clarity. When someone avoids emotional engagement, your brain tries to fill the gap. You internalize their absence as a problem in yourself. You question, am I too emotional? Am I too sensitive? Am I too demanding? Over time, this creates self-censorship and quiet restraint. You dim parts of yourself to accommodate someone who can't or won't express themselves fully. I remember being close to someone who seemed like the perfect listener. They were polite, warm, and attentive. When I spoke, they nodded, smiled, and seemed engaged. It felt safe. It felt easy. But over time, I noticed a pattern. Whenever I brought up something important, plans, conflicts, or frustrations, the conversation would shift quickly. A short okay, a change of subject or a neutral acknowledgement without follow-up. There were no arguments, no tension, no hostility, but it left a subtle void. I realized I was doing all the emotional work. I was analyzing, reflecting, and adjusting not just for my own clarity, but to maintain their comfort. When I later tried to express frustration or ask for their perspective, they would politely shrug or deflect. I don't really have strong feelings about it. Whatever you think is fine. And slowly I began suppressing my own opinions and excitement around them. I stopped sharing ideas that might require emotional engagement. I avoided vulnerable topics by being polite and non-confrontational. They had taught me to shrink, and I didn't even notice. Unlike aggressive manipulators, the emotionally polite avoider rarely causes dramatic conflict. There's no shouting, no accusations, no overt criticism. Yet the effect is the same. Emotional labor shifts to you. You are just, moderate, and self-censor over months and years. This quiet influence can erode confidence, autonomy, and authenticity in relationships. Conversations feel safe but emotionally shallow. They rarely share feelings or opinions in meaningful ways. Difficult topics are consistently avoided or deflected. You find yourself taking on emotional responsibility. You leave interactions feeling drained or uncertain even though they were polite. The clearest indicator. You feel unseen emotionally despite outward politeness. Recognize that their avoidance is not your fault. Express your needs clearly even if they avoid discussion. Limit sharing your emotional labor with people who won't engage. Cultivate relationships with people who match your emotional investment. The key is understanding politeness is not the same as care. Being easy to be around doesn't mean the relationship is nourishing. The emotionally polite avoider teaches a quiet, insidious lesson. You cannot rely on their presence for validation, guidance, or emotional support. You may love their calm, their neutrality, their non-confrontational nature, but in reality, it often leaves you carrying the weight of the relationship alone. True emotional allies don't avoid discomfort. They navigate it together. They engage honestly. They create space for both voices. If you notice yourself moderating your emotions to keep someone comfortable, ask, is this relationship supporting me or quietly holding me back? Because the difference is subtle, but the impact is profound. Let's move to the ninth type. The conditional supporter seems like a friend, partner, or colleague at first. They smile when you succeed. They praise your ideas. They nod enthusiastically when you share your plans. On the surface, it feels genuine, like someone has your back, like someone is rooting for you. But the key word here is conditional. Their support comes with invisible strings. It's not given freely, unreservedly, or consistently. It's granted only when you align with their expectations, their comfort zone, or their sense of what's acceptable. And slowly you start feeling the limits of that support even when nothing overtly negative is said. The conditional supporter doesn't sabotage you directly. They don't yell. They rarely criticize outright. Instead, they shape your actions quietly by attaching their approval to your behavior. They celebrate your achievements only when they reflect well on them. They encourage you only if your choices don't challenge their comfort. They withdraw warmth when your decisions surprise them or make them feel insecure. It's subtle, often unconscious, but highly effective. You start learning, without them ever saying it explicitly, that certain behaviors earn praise while others risk disapproval. Humans are wired to seek social validation. So you begin to regulate yourself, tailoring your ambitions, your choices, even your personality to maintain their support. I remember working on a project that excited me, a direction I had wanted to explore for months. I shared my plan with someone I considered a supportive friend. At first, they responded positively. "Wow, this sounds amazing. I'm proud of you." But as soon as the plan grew outside the bounds of what they thought was safe or reasonable, their enthusiasm cooled. Are you sure that's a good idea? It seems risky. I mean, I guess it could work, but maybe you should stick to what you know. The shift wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, softly phrased, polite, yet unmistakable. I noticed myself hesitating. I second-guessed the parts of the project that mattered most. I adjusted my plan slightly, not because I doubted its potential, but because I wanted to keep their approval. By the end, the project still moved forward, but my confidence had been quietly undermined. I realized I had unconsciously given their conditional support more weight than my own instincts. Conditional supporters teach a subtle but profound lesson. Approval is earned, not given freely. You begin to doubt your own judgment. You start measuring every decision against the potential reaction of the supporter. You suppress authentic desires or creative ideas to avoid disapproval. It's a slow, almost invisible form of influence. And because the support exists in some form, it's easy to rationalize. They're just giving advice. They care. Meanwhile, you're learning to self-censor in ways that align with their expectations, not your own growth. Conditional supporters often act out of insecurity. They fear being left behind or outshone. They need to feel needed or important. They worry about losing control in subtle ways. They measure their value based on your actions. By offering support selectively, they maintain influence over your decisions while preserving the appearance of kindness and encouragement. Praise or encouragement is inconsistent, dependent on your choices. Enthusiasm disappears when you act independently or unpredictably. Their support often comes with subtle warnings or qualifiers. You feel you have to perform or behave a certain way to maintain their approval. Over time, you adjust your ambitions to match what you think will earn support. The most telling sign. You feel restricted in your growth. Even when someone claims to support you. Recognize that true support is unconditional. It doesn't require you to compromise your vision. Give more weight to your own instincts than external approval. Limit sharing your most vulnerable or ambitious plans with conditional supporters. Surround yourself with people who celebrate growth without strings attached. The key is remembering their support is not the measure of your worth. Conditional supporters can feel safe, encouraging, and even loving until you notice the invisible boundaries they place on your life. They teach you to moderate yourself to maintain favor. They teach you to value approval over authenticity. They teach you to shrink your ambitions to fit someone else's comfort. True allies lift you without limits. They cheer your successes, respect your instincts, and stay present even when your path diverges from their expectations. If you notice that support feels given and withdrawn based on your behavior, pause and ask, is this relationship nurturing me or quietly shaping me to fit their comfort? Because the difference is subtle, but the impact is profound. Finally, let's talk about the 10th type. The kind person who never defends you seems perfect at first glance. They're polite. They're considerate. They smile. They laugh with you. They celebrate your successes. On the surface, it feels like a supportive relationship. But the truth is, kindness without defense is dangerous in subtle ways. Because in life, people will challenge you, question you, or speak poorly of you. And when someone is truly an ally, they step up. They defend you when it matters. The kind person who never defends you doesn't. And over time, this silence quietly erodes trust, confidence, and connection. They rarely speak ill of you themselves. They avoid conflict. They keep interaction smooth. But when others criticize, undermine, or misrepresent you, they remain silent. In meetings, they nod but never counter unfair criticism. With mutual friends, they laugh along rather than correct misconceptions. When you are treated poorly, they remain calm and polite, never stepping in. Their kindness feels safe until you realize it protects no one but themselves. Over time, this silence teaches a dangerous lesson. Your needs are optional. Your reputation must be protected by yourself. You are often on your own when others attack or challenge you. I remember an experience with someone I considered a close friend. We were in a group setting where a misunderstanding about my work spread. Some of the people there misrepresented my contributions, suggesting I had taken credit for someone else's effort. I looked to this friend, someone I trusted, to step in, but all they did was smile politely and say, "Well, I think we all did a lot, right?" Nothing direct, nothing supportive, no correction, no defense. At first, I thought I was overreacting. Maybe they just didn't want to get involved. But over time, I noticed a pattern. Whenever situations arose where I was criticized or misunderstood, they remained silent. They never voiced support or stood up for me. And unconsciously, I started holding back, hesitating to share ideas, second-guessing my contributions, afraid I had no ally if things went wrong. Their kindness, so consistent in tone and demeanor, was not a shield. It wasn't a foundation I could rely on. It simply was, without protection, without defense. The kind person who never defends you operates subtly. Their kindness creates a sense of safety, so you let your guard down. Their silence in critical moments teaches self-reliance, but not in a healthy, empowering way. You begin overcompensating to avoid conflict or criticism because support isn't guaranteed. Over time, this dynamic teaches you to internalize conflict. You feel responsible for defending your reputation, your decisions, and even your worth. You learn that social niceness doesn't equal support. You begin to weigh every interaction carefully, filtering yourself to avoid vulnerability. Most often, they are not malicious. They fear conflict. They value harmony over justice. They prioritize politeness over loyalty. They may assume defending you is unnecessary or that it's your responsibility. And while their intentions might be harmless, the effect is clear. You are left emotionally unsupported when it matters most. They are consistently pleasant but never intervene in conflicts involving you. They acknowledge your achievements but don't protect your reputation. You often feel isolated in challenging situations despite their presence. You hesitate to share vulnerabilities knowing they won't step up. The most telling sign. You feel unseen in critical moments even by someone who is kind. Recognize that kindness alone doesn't equal support. Value actions over words, especially in conflict. Surround yourself with people who will stand by you, not just smile with you. Learn to protect yourself, but don't mistake passive niceness for loyalty. True allies defend without hesitation. They don't need dramatic gestures. They show up consistently when it matters. Kindness is important, but without defense, it can become a silent limiter. The kind person who never defends you quietly teaches you to fight your battles alone. You may feel grateful for their warmth, but over time it becomes clear. Warmth without action is empty support. Notice who steps up when you are challenged. Not just who smiles with you when things are easy. Because true support is not just being pleasant. It's being present when it counts. If someone is consistently silent when defense is needed, their kindness may be a comfort, but it will never be a shield. Life is full of people who seem kind, supportive, or harmless, but subtlety matters. The truth is, toxicity isn't always loud, dramatic, or obvious. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's polite. Sometimes it's hidden behind smiles, nods, or compliments. The 10 types we've explored today, those constant doubters, fear projectors, quiet competitors, overly agreeable friends, insecure complimentary, soft-spoken gaslights, silent resentment holders, emotionally polite avoiders, conditional supporters, and kind people who never defend you, aren't always easy to spot. But once you recognize the patterns, you gain clarity, freedom, and the power to protect yourself. If you're still watching right now, please make sure you subscribe to Stoic Code because this kind of content is designed to help you see through subtle manipulation and protect your peace. Drop a comment below telling me which of these types resonated most with you, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. The conversation around healthy relationships needs to happen more often. Remember, your energy, your growth, and your peace of mind matter more than anyone else's comfort with your success. True allies celebrate without strings, defend without hesitation, and show up when it counts. Take these insights, reflect on the relationships in your life, and notice who lifts you up, who subtly holds you back, who deserves your trust, and who doesn't. Because life is too short to shrink for the comfort of others. You deserve relationships that support, challenge, and celebrate the full spectrum of who you are. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe and share this with everyone you know. Check out our other deep dives into human behavior, psychology, and the hidden dynamics of everyday relationships. Protect your energy, honor your growth, and always choose people who genuinely choose you in return. Thank you for watching Stoic Code, and we'll see you in the next video.